Hello, once again, this is Paul T coming back at you, and we're going to discuss what went wrong with the United States of America. And here's a brief outline. Number one, the departure from the U.S. Constitution, right? And we see that government powers have been broadened and individual liberties restricted. And then number two is high taxation and ballooning debt. And although this may seem like a simple explanation, it actually is quite simple. Um, the United States of America is first and foremost an idea, right? The founding fathers, and a lot of them were scholars, um, and some of them were even geniuses. But they wrote the U.S. Constitution deliberately, and there was a lot of study and a lot of debate, and they wrote the Constitution in such a way as to limit government powers, not to grant them, right? Especially not to the government. But for example, the Bill of Rights puts limits on government in favor of individual liberties. And that was the whole thing, right? Was to stop the encroachment of the government onto the lives of individual citizens. And again, some of the founding fathers were legitimate geniuses like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. And so we should trust their judgment because they were so afraid of government encroachment of individual liberties that is the entire reason why the U.S. Constitution was written and why the Bill of Rights are written, even the Declaration of Independence. So if we are looking at the principles governing the founding fathers, we find that the role of government is to ensure liberty, individual liberty, not governmental liberty, but individual liberties and justice. And liberty and justice actually are two countervailing forces, right? More of one means less of the other, vice versa. And let's define liberty. Liberty is the ability to do as one pleases, right? So, but again, if I have liberties and you have liberties, we can't be encroaching one another's liberties, right? So there has to be a balance with others' liberties. And that is the role of government, actually. The Declaration of Independence does speak of certain unalienable rights that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Therefore, our laws and our government should be there to prevent the infringement of other people's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, that is what the Declaration of Independence calls for, and I believe that is the spirit of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, etc. Now, on the other hand, we have this need to preserve justice. Okay, and justice, as I define it, is equal protection under the law. Okay, so again, the law is to preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But nowadays, we seem to have laws which serve to limit the liberties of everyone, right? And I guess it's for the common good or the public safety. Not 100% sure that that's what they accomplish, but we should not have laws that are just limiting the liberties of everyone without, you know, the definite goals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And one trend that I notice is that government seems to want to keep growing, and it gets forever bigger and bigger and bigger. And as there is more money flowing through government, then there's more power, right? Because you're able to siphon off the money, especially if you're a politician. But also industries, right, are able to take advantage of the government for their own purposes, and and therefore those industries get richer as well and more powerful. Okay, so um, getting back to the Constitution, it was not meant to empower the government and create laws limiting individual liberty, but to protect everyone from one another, which is the ideal of justice, and then to limit government, which is the ideal of liberty. But the Constitution nowadays seems to be ignored by politicians, and actually, I'm not 100% sure that it's just because of corruption, although definitely corruption exists even in our democratic government. Um, but instead, the government grows unchecked. And I think a lot of it has to do with ignorance about, why our government was formed. And maybe, people are even unaware of the U.S. Constitution. Maybe they've never even read it. Not sure. But uh, there is a trend to bigger government, and it is distressing to me, and I'm sure a lot of you out there who love the idea of the United States of America, uh, which was based on the principles in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. But unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any meaningful difference now between Democrats and Republicans. Politicians seem more self interested and seek more and more power for themselves and for their party. And one example, which I think is a clear example, is the growth of taxes. Taxes seem to be growing and growing and growing, and we have an inability to opt out of entitlement programs or healthcare programs. Even if we have our own or we don't want to pay in, we have to pay, right? It's like a tax. Um, so that's like a hidden tax. It's not necessarily an income tax, but it is a tax. And history repeats itself. If we look back at all of the empires of the world, the fall of empire has to do with economics. So the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, they all fell due to economics. I mean, in the end, you could say that it was a military collapse, perhaps even with the British, right? You could say it was World War II, but the military collapse was basically it was caused. Um, the resolution was caused by a decline in, let's say, the currency or just basic fundamental economics. All right, so history does seem to repeat itself, and today we see a devaluation of currencies and a rise of debt, and it has not yet led to military weakness. The United States is so far ahead in the technological race when it comes to military armaments. I should do one on hypersonic weapons, which I am certain that the United States has already developed an arsenal. And if we haven't, we have been remiss, but we already know how to do it. But the debt crisis may no longer be avoidable now. I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't seem like there is any political will to cut the debt and cut spending and to balance the budget. And as this continues and I do believe that we are at a global cyclical low, a deflationary low in the world economic cycle. And as interest rates naturally will start increasing, at some point they'll have to, then servicing the debt, not just the US debt, but the world debt, will become much more difficult. And I'm afraid that we will enter into a hyperinflationary cycle. So I am afraid for the world, but I am also specifically afraid for the United States. Um, we are still the freest society in the US due to our past adherence to the Constitution. But the Constitution seems to be forgotten more and more, or it's not being followed, and the principles behind the Constitution are not being followed. Um, and I just want to throw out here, we're nowhere near a totalitarian state right now, but I just want to throw out that definition of totalitarianism, which is a form of rule in which the government attempts to maintain total control over society, including all aspects of the public and private lives of its citizens. Now, this does seem to describe China and Russia more than it does the United States. And of that, we should be thankful for our liberties here in the United States, our freedoms. But we should also clean our own house, because more and more the government is increasing, and it is sort of creeping into every aspect of our lives. And as long as we allow that to happen, government will continue to grow, the U.S. debt will continue to grow, and I'm afraid that our liberties will be squashed little by little. Well, that's all for now. Bye-bye.